everyone. Welcome again to this fabulous dinner. And now I get to have a conversation with two extraordinary men. Arne, you served as secretary to President Obama for 6 years. Colin, you endorsed him twice. So I would just love to step back and have you all reflect on what made him such a transformational figure, so inspiring and so unifying, as you know, perhaps taking a positive road from some of the other noise going on today in the U.S. You want to start?
You had the longer term, Arne. Go ahead.
No, fire away. Follow you.
I found that he was a remarkable individual. I liked the way in which he approached the nation. I liked the fact that he was doing something that was historic. First black president, could not ignore that. And I spent quite a bit of time with him before he decided to run. He would come by my office in Alexandria and we'd chat about this. And I'd ask him, you sure you want to do this? And to my great surprise, he would always say, I'm thinking about it. And then the answer became yes toward the end. And so I think he did a great job as president of the United States. There were some tricky issues on foreign policy. But I think he was an example and he inspired the country. But you have to face the reality that maybe the country wasn't entirely ready for a racial change of that nature because he ran into some difficulties because of that. But I'm very pleased to have voted for him. I'm very pleased at the job he did. Pleased to have had the opportunity to work with Arne. And I think history will treat him very, very well.
Great.
I'll answer your question 1 second. I've never done this publicly. There was a tiny, tiny number of people who I would seek their advice very quietly. And this man was at the top of that list. And a little bit on education, much more on other stuff that the president was working on. And he was always dead honest and clear and very compelling in his messages, and his judgment was extraordinary. So I just want to publicly thank you for being just a fount of wisdom and information. In those roles, there's very few people you can sort of trust totally, and put it all out there and be totally vulnerable and get absolutely honest feedback, no spin, no anything. And so I just can't tell you how important and how helpful that was to me and to the president. So.
Can I mention that I'm proud to be on the board of this museum, or we call it the council. And I hope that if you have time, and it's going to be open a while longer, you would wander around. It is a fabulous place. It's been open a couple of years now, and what's remarkable is the attention it gets. People thought they would come here and spend an hour or two. They're coming and they're spending 6, 7 hours. And the place is just overwhelmed with people. And it's doing a great job, and it is a perfect example of one part of America's history. But I really shouldn't call it one part. It's American history in all of its parts. And so I'm very, very pleased that you're here this evening. I was very proud to hear that you're going to be here tonight. I was here all day yesterday.
Fantastic. Let's talk a little bit of politics. You're a moderate Republican, moderate Democrat. I don't know if anybody's changed their stripes in the meantime. Just a little thinking on why politics has become so extreme, what the impact of that has been on addressing educational issues. We talked a little bit today in our incredibly productive day of programming about how disappointing it is that education continues not to be a front and center issue for really either party. Yeah. And so I would just love to hear your reflections on that, how we might move the ball forward, if there are any leaders you all see on the horizon who would actually take a bigger step forward on that issue.
As a career Army officer, I had no political life. Right. So I would always consider myself to be a moderate American. And I have voted on both sides over the course of my history, because I felt that my job as an American citizen to always pick the best alternative for the people, no matter which party it is. And we've kind of lost that. We had become more politicized, and frankly, in this administration, we have become completely separated as two people. And I think that's very unfortunate. So that things are decided now, at least by the Republican Party, almost unanimously. And unanimously is what President Trump wants and what he gets. That's the way it's working. I think it's unfortunate. I hope it changes in due course because I don't think this is in the best interest of the country. And I'm a soldier and a former Secretary of State and former National Security Advisor, so I've seen a lot of the world. I still watch a lot of the world. And the world is scratching their heads, looking at us, wondering what happened. Is this the America we used to know? And the answer is not right now, it isn't. And people say, well, do you think it will ever recover? Yes, it will. I've been through quite a bit in this life of mine. I've seen times worse than these or more disturbing than these, let me put it that way. And we always come back because ultimately it's the American people. And one of my little expressions is, the Constitution says we the people, not me the president. But that means that we the people have to act like we the people and not just stand there staring at the ceiling.
Precisely. Arne, you want to tackle the...
I'll answer two different questions maybe. So on the education front, and this is some things I'm proud of, the successes, and this is one where I think we've all collectively failed, is education has never been a voting issue. And I used to watch the presidential debates and just dying to have education come up. And it doesn't come up, and it still doesn't come up. This has nothing to do with the current president or not. Mm-hmm. And let me be clear, I never blame politicians. I blame us as voters. And education should be the ultimate bipartisan issue. No one left or right has a monopoly on any good ideas, far from it. But education is always, I think in the midterms, 6% of people went to the voting booth thinking about education. And so until we vote across the political spectrum, we're going to see politicians continue to have platitudes and sound bites and photo ops, reading little stories to kids, but not hold themselves accountable for results. And so, again, forget political affiliations or parties or liberal or conservative, doesn't matter. We don't vote in education. We don't vote in local elections. We don't vote in state elections. We don't vote in national elections. And that's our fault. And if we voted, politicians would follow. One quick story of South Korea that is sort of kicking our butt in virtually every metric. President Obama met with the president of South Korea and said, what's your biggest challenge? He said, my biggest challenge are my parents are too demanding. And that, I think it was either in kindergarten or first grade, even my poorest parents demand that our kids learn English, and I can't keep up with this. When I tell a story, people sort of this nervous laughter that we don't ever have those demands. I've never had people kicking down our door saying our kids have to have a better education. So that's the education answer. On the current, on the current administration, again, I'm speaking for myself, not speaking for President Obama or anybody else, that we knew that he was a con man. We knew that he was, controlled and, was acting on behalf of other countries and another country. I'll just leave it at that. What I just didn't begin to anticipate was the capitulation of of the Republican Party. I thought there'd be some guardrails. I thought there'd be some checks and balances. I thought there'd be some role that Congress, the House and Senate would play. And to see that be decimated, that was the part that, for me, was totally unanticipated.
Just to pick up on what Arne said, I'm a product of public school education. I was talking at the table that I'm lucky I got through any public school. I was just a kid in the street of South Bronx section of New York, a place called Fort Apache, with immigrant parents. And C's and D's, that's fine, didn't care. And then my mother pushed. She wanted me to go to the Bronx High School of Science. She wanted me to go to Stuyvesant High School. And they didn't let me in either one. And so they put me into Morris High School. It was a school where they had to let you in. And then 40 years after all this happened, and I did not get into either one of those special schools, I was now the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the Armed Forces of the United States, when CCNY actually found through their records what the guidance counselor in my junior high school, what he had written. And sure enough, at a dinner in my honor, they presented me with what my junior high school counselor had written. Young Powell wishes to go to Bronx High School of Science or Stuyvesant. We recommend against it. So I went to Morris. You know what? It was the best thing that happened to me. They measured me correctly at that time. And then I got into City College of New York. Don't ask me how, but I got in there. And it was there, after 6 months of fooling around, I found ROTC. ROTC, they don't fool around. And they said, this is what it takes. We're expecting straight A's. You got any questions? Nope. And that became my life. Became my life as we were talking at the table, because ROTC, that military, became my family, my new family, as I left my old family in the South Bronx. And it became everything that I wanted to do well. And I did it well, and I applied myself, and I succeeded. I graduated at the top of my ROTC class, went into the Army, and I'll never forget, we had a segregated country at that time, but the Army was pretty much non-segregated. That was over. We were transferring over. And I came into the Army 4 years after the end of segregation in the military. And I was saying at the table, I was getting ready to say at the table, I'll never forget what the Army sergeants told me when I got to Fort Benning, Georgia. The infantry school, I was getting ready to go to infantry school, paratroop school, ranger school, all that stuff. And the message they gave to me was, we don't care where the hell you came from. Don't give us any crap about you got immigrant parents. We don't care. We don't care what color your skin is. We don't care any of that. The only thing we care about is performance. You perform, you'll move up. If you don't, you won't. Do you have any questions? No, I got that. I became chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
And Arne, I'd say your analog is athletics, right? I mean, you learned about race and teamwork and through the discipline of sports. Fair?
Totally fair. That was, I was lucky to go to some amazing schools and have some extraordinary teachers, but I always say my best classroom was always the basketball court, and all the, I don't even call them cliches, but the teamwork, the hard work, unselfishness, handling pressure. And for me, the big, growing up playing on the south and west side of Chicago, being able to read character, because I had to navigate neighborhoods and get in and out safely and figure out who to trust and who not to trust. And so way beyond just the basketball, just those experiences playing those courts, those are just absolutely invaluable, shaped me.
Let me say one thing, though. The public schools I went to then were quality schools with quality teachers, and they were well financed. And I keep telling everybody to this day, the reason I got through schools, public schools in New York, is the people of New York City said, whatever else we do in life with our tax money, we have to create the next generation of leaders for New York City. That kind of feeling around the country is breaking down. And so we're not giving our young people the kind of quality education that I got, or my sister got, or all my immigrant relatives got. And I've been to a number of places in the country now where I'll go to a city, I won't mention one, but a big city, where they used to have roughly 80% of the funding for the schools was provided by the government, and they're 20% by the private sector. Now it's the reverse, totally reversed, so that the private sector is expected to do it all and not the government. But what responsibility does the government have that is not greater than educating its own future? And that's what I think is going wrong in this country. We are not demanding that our authorities, our leaders, give us all the money that's needed to educate our future. I'm very proud to have 12 elementary and middle schools named after me. I'm very proud of that. And the City College of New York even went and named a college within the college after me, the Colin Powell School for Global and Civic Leadership. I'm very proud of all of that. And I visited every single one. And these kids are good, but they're not getting the kind of support they need. They're not getting everything they need to take advantage of the educational opportunities that are out there. And I think we got to do a better job. We also have problems with segregated school systems. You go into the inner cities, and most of my schools are in inner cities. You go in there and you see these kids, they're bright-eyed and whatnot, but they're not getting what they need to stay on track. As one teacher told me, she was a first grader teacher, she said, they all show up the same way. They got their new backpack on, their eyes are blazing, they're so happy. but they haven't been prepared for school. They haven't been prepared in the home or with preschooling. As a result, by the third grade, they know they're behind. They know they're behind, and we know they're heading to jail or they're heading to drop out. It's a given. And so every time I start to think about education, I find myself going further and further back in time. Education begins in a mother's arms. It doesn't begin in school, it begins in a mother's arms, where a young infant baby is there, a couple weeks old, trying to figure out what's going on, but suddenly discovers there's this lady here. She seems, I think she's a lady. She's very nice. She sings to me. She changes me when there's something wrong. She's the one who feeds me. That's the language I'll learn. Yeah, that's it. Shut down everything else. I'm going to learn that language. And that kid's on the way to an education. But it has to be fueled. It has to be fueled by reading to the child. I don't think there's anything more important than reading to the child and giving the child the blessing of language. And then starting in on math and this, that, and the other. And if a child gets into first grade, or first grade, let's call it, and by then has not mastered some level of reading, does not know how to mind itself, mind its manners, doesn't know anything about time or arithmetic, that kid's behind. And so I'm so proud of the schools that I have that are named after me, and as I say, I've been to every one of them. And one of the biggest differences I see in every school is the principal. The principal is the one who sets the standards. Like a drill sergeant, I like this. Sets the standards. This is what's acceptable. This is not acceptable. But it all starts out in the earliest ages, and it took me a while to get there. I kept thinking, well, we'll fix them in third. No, you won't fix them in third. They're already lost in third grade. And so right now we've got to do a better job of preschool education, but most importantly, the better job of what we do in the home. And frankly, we've got too many broken homes, too many kids that are being raised in families that are single family or single person households. And I visited a Cristo Rey school not too long ago, a great program. But this particular school I visited, they had about 82% single parents. And of the single parents, most of them were women. And then I asked, how many are grandmothers? 27%. And so this is not the kind of functioning educational system you want the kids to start out in. They're all smiling, they're all happy. But as the teacher told me in that earlier story, by the time they get to the third grade, the smile they had in their eyes is gone out. They know they're behind, and they have to start acting behind. And that's where we get into trouble.
Let me talk on the other end of early, an area that has been near and dear to both of your hearts, and funny way of phrasing it, but the issue around high school graduation and eliminating dropout factories. In 2010, America's Promise Alliance, which Secretary Powell was the founding chair of, and Alan Powell is today the chair of, and I was blessed to sit on that board for a few years, established the goal of 90% high school graduation. Arne, I also know you were maniacally focused, both in Chicago and in the secretary role, on elimination of dropout factors. We have moved the needle. It's gone from 79 or so to about 85% in 2017, but it looks like we'll probably fall short when they get the final numbers on 2020 of hitting 90%. I guess on both the positive and, on the positive side, we got 2.8 million or so more students through high school. How did we do that, and how do we kind of galvanize the political will, every other kind of will, to actually hit the 90? It's still about, 2,300 or so dropout factories out there that are really remain the biggest numerical problem. So curious for both of you, because you both devoted a lot of your time and passion around how we can eliminate this criminal factor, frankly.
Yeah. So for me, the challenge that we have in the United States is I just think we should have a couple goals for our nation. I think we should try and lead the world in access to high-quality pre-K, and that's where he started. I think we should have a goal of 90% high school graduation rate. We should have a goal that 100% of high school graduates are prepared for college or careers. And we should try and lead the world in college completion again. Now, those are just goals. We could have lots of vigorous debate on the best strategies to achieve those goals, and what works in Montana may not work in the Bronx, may not work in New Orleans or DC or Chicago, whatever. But as a nation, we never talk about those goals. And we tried to put that goal out there and be very, clear on it. We did some things right, and I can talk about that. We made some mistakes, but for this administration, you'll never hear them talk about a goal of a 90%. And what we should have is every politician embracing those goals and having vigorous debate on the best ways to achieve them. And then we as voters hold them accountable for producing those results. And what we do at education conversations, I call it just small ball. We're debating little minor things, little technical strategies that don't add up to much. So that's what we're missing. How did we get there? Just a huge focus on it, just the obvious change in our nation's economy that when I was in high school, I had friends drop out and they went and worked in the stockyards and steel mills in Chicago, and they did just fine. And we know those jobs are gone, they're never coming back, and high school graduates today high school dropouts are basically condemned to poverty and social failure. So the swing wasn't so massive before. It is literally a life or death swing at this point. So focus. We did some very controversial things. We put lots of resources behind some of those, quote-unquote dropout factories. We also moved out teachers. We moved out principals. Same building, same kids, same socioeconomic challenges, very, very different results. As you know, we started to do that in Chicago. And it's hard work, but that leadership, those adults, the tone and the culture and expectations they set are huge. And you had a number of places that were, quote-unquote dropout factories, where, again, just to be clear, that wasn't an accident that young people were dropping out. Those systems were designed to have them drop out. That was the predictable outcome of what would happen. We challenged the fundamental nature of those systems and got a lot better, but we're not where we need to go. And so the numbers are getting better, but still 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 kids every year dropping out of high school. And what chance do they have to ever sit in a room like this? It's not going to happen.
It's also driven to a large extent by where kids live.
Yep.
The environment they're living in, what kind of home life they have in that environment, particularly in our very, very low income areas. And we've been successful, and Arne was in the lead of all this, of getting it up to about 90% almost of graduation from high school. But is it a real graduation? Are we really qualifying these kids to go on and do something else in life? Or is it really just, show business? And I think we have to do a better job of that. And we also do not have the kind of support we need from parents, because a lot of these youngsters don't have parents. They have caregivers, or they have a baby daddy, a term I detest with all my power. And so they're not getting what they need in the home. If I could snap my finger and do one thing, it would put all these kids in a home with a couple parents. And it doesn't mean you can't have a successful kid with one parent, but that parent has to be committed. The parent has to have the means to take care of the kid. And if the kid's not taken care of, the kids, if he doesn't, and America's Promise, which you worked on, the first thing was, every child should have a responsible, caring, loving adult. There's no substitute for that in life. And then second, a safe place. Third, a healthy start in life. And then fourth, a marketable education. And fifth, an opportunity to serve, or put the spirit of serving in their heart. But I have always thought, and the reason it's number one, children need adults in their life. And if it's a good tribe, if it's a good crowd, then that's fine. But if it isn't, the kid's going to be destroyed. He's going to be destroyed before he ever gets out of school, in school.
One quick add, your audience here will get it, that you got to be very, very careful about what you measure. I'm big on accountability. Yep. If you just look at graduation rates, you create some incentives for school districts just to push kids through. We actually saw that here in DC. So for me, yes, we got to focus on graduation rates, but we always got to look at college perseverance rates and what happens post that. To have you need to measure and account and measure, the check and the balance. Yep. And so I just want to make sure it's not just one number.
Well, and you hit on the fifth tenet of America's Promise, and the two of you epitomize a life of service, right? You've served country, you've served city, you've served underserved populations all across the country. I'm just curious, as you think about things that need to be restructured in our culture, is there enough emphasis on our need to serve as citizens here? Would actually enhancing that emphasis in schools, in colleges, elsewhere, would that have an impact, and do you think it's being adequately elevated today?
I think it would help, it would work. But one of the problems we're having is that there are too many neighborhoods, too many communities where people in that community are not up to the task. They are poor, they have bad habits, bad neighborhoods. It's all part of one single problem. Lack of economic opportunity, living in a poor neighborhood. Poor neighborhoods tend to come with poor schools. And if you got a neighborhood full of poor schools, these kids are not all going to be graduates. And if they do graduate, they may not get a full education. And so we have to see this not just as a single problem, just give them more money. The neighborhoods have to be fixed.
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in national service. I'd love to see it not mandatory, but an option for every single young person. For me, it's not just a chance to serve. Honestly, I'm really, we haven't talked about this, but I'm really worried about our democracy frame. And we're all so separated. We're all separated by race and geography and our social media feed and what we do. And I'm not a big kumbaya guy, but when people try and solve problems together, when they work together and build some trust and build some relationships, they learn to compromise. Then you have some hope as adults that they can do well. So programs like City Year and others that bring a diverse group of folks together to work in tough neighborhoods and roll up their sleeves and do some stuff. Absent that, I just worry we continue to go in very, very opposite directions, and that's not how democracy thrives or survives. And so for me, it's much bigger than just service. It's actually fighting for our democracy.
Pulling things together.
We also have a situation where if you have the means, you're going to try to get your kids into the best schools you can, or get them into the best neighborhoods that have the best schools. And to heck with everybody else who's not in that good neighborhood. And that's what's left. Not good.
Nope. We have a large divide that needs to be eliminated, and it would be wonderful if this group began to lead in that regard. Colin, I read that you had 13 rules or so, that you put forth at some point, and your 13th one is one that is very inspiring. They all are, but perpetual optimism is a force multiplier. I think sometimes in this sector and in this era, it is hard to maintain perpetual optimism. Arne, you too are an optimist, and I think that's what keeps you chugging along, doing the great work you're doing in Chicago today. Can you reflect on what you're optimistic about, where you see, our ability to push forward, where you see the ability of a group like this who is committed and focused on the mission of what we say bending the arc of human potential so that all people will have equal access to the future. We'd just love to hear you both comment on the upside of what we can do to change this, change the paradigm.
I have these, they're not rules so much as they are just little things that were under my glass on my desk when I was a commander. And a reporter called once and said, writing an article about you, can you read off some of these little rules we're told you have under your glass? And I said, well, most of them aren't proper, you can't. Well, read me some. So I read 13. The others are too dirty. I'm an infantry officer. I speak a different language than the rest of you. And so I read those 13. There's no logic to them, but I found a logic afterwards. And the last one I put down was a military expression. Perpetual optimism, is a way of succeeding in life and in the military. And what it essentially means is you have to be optimistic. You have to believe in what you're doing. You have to believe in the kids you're teaching to give it an educational angle. And always, and we teach our officers and we teach our enlisted people, believe in yourself, believe you can do it. And even when things look bad, optimism can take you through. And so it's something I've always used in my own life. And I've encouraged all of my subordinates, guys, this rule number one is, it ain't as bad as it looks. It'll look better in the morning. Which isn't a prediction, it's a hope. But without that hope, you're going nowhere. And it's the very first rule that I had taken off my glass and given to them. It ain't as bad as you think, it'll look better in the morning. That's just a hope. You're going to make it look better in the morning. But don't think it's going to get better without you. And then perpetual optimism marries up with that one. And then there's one right in the middle, number 4, I think it is, that says it can be done, which means the same thing. It can be done. So our kids have to be taught that they can learn. They can be successful in life. There's no reason for them to be dropouts. Somebody's here to help you. Somebody's here to give you the education you need, the support you need, and someone to teach you how to behave. And that's what perpetual optimism is about. Can be done, and stick on the right track, and you'll get somewhere in life. My parents and my immigrant neighborhood that I lived in, everybody was an immigrant in my neighborhood. But we had immigrant parents, and they were something else. And I like to kid everybody by saying that when I was growing up in the South Bronx section of Fort Apache, I had all of these aunts, and the aunts would hang out the window of their apartment, watching, constantly watching the kids. And if anybody did anything wrong, one of the kids, bam, they get it, you know? And you could talk about the speed of the internet. There was nothing faster than the speed, nothing faster than the speed of the AuntNet in the South Bronx section of New York City. But they cared about us, and we knew they cared. That's all it was. Oh my God, Aunt Vaz is after me. God, she's going to tell my mother. This is part of growing up. And the other thing that we've talked about at the table is kids have to be taught that failure is a part of life. Don't go seeking it, but don't be afraid to fail. Failure is a part of life. You can't go through life without failing at something. And this is more for kids of this ilk in this group than it is, say, for poor kids in the neighborhood who fail all the time. But I've run into too many families at a higher level in the society who their kids don't know what failure is. And I've faced this a number of times. At Japanese high school a couple of years ago, and I gave my talk, and all the kids, the A guys, all the little kids with they wanted to ask me questions from the little cards. So I said, yeah. And I called on a girl who was way in the back, and she's about 15, and she just got up. She said, General Powell, have you ever failed at anything? Are you ever afraid? I tried to figure out immediately what was going on in her life. But the answer I gave her was that, of course, you can't go through life without failing. The question is, are you going to fail or not? You will fail. The problem is, will you overcome it? And you can overcome it, especially at your age. So never worry about failure. Once you've failed, my own personal way of handling it was find out what I did wrong, fix yourself, and fix everybody else around you. It has to be fixed. You take the failure and you roll it up in a little ball, throw it over your shoulder, and you do not spend any more time on it. But it's a part of life. And yes, I'm afraid of things. Even at this age, I'm afraid of things. Nothing terrified me more, though, the first time I got shot at in Vietnam. And I knew tomorrow morning I'm going to get shot at again. But you have to learn to overcome fear. Fear and failure kind of go together. And learn how to overcome it. Parents need to teach their children how to face these things and how to overcome them, because that's part of life. Fearing failure, and then how do you solve it? How do you get over it? And I do it with my grandchildren. We sit around and talk about it. And I could see the little anxiety in their faces. And then I tell them my stories. Geez, you were that bad, huh? Yeah. Yeah, I was. I really was. But look at me. You know, I'm doing okay now. So you got to teach your kids what life is all about. You know, life leads to death. I talk to my kids about that. It will come to all of us. But what you do is have a great life until that happens. But don't worry about it. It's going to happen. But just remember that you have got a great life in front of you in a great country with a great family that cares about you. Make the best use of it. Don't waste what you have been given by our gracious Lord.
Wonderful.
Two quick things. I don't know if I call myself an optimist. I think I'm a realist, but I had this joy of visiting hundreds and hundreds of schools all over the country. I'm still in schools all the time now. And we just have some amazing kids coming from the toughest, inner city, rural, Native American reservations who are just overcoming extraordinary odds every day to get to school, to find creative ways to get there safely and go through way more than they should. I'm working with a young guy now who's going to college, has a 4.0, and he's raised himself literally since he was 16. He's literally been on independent since he was 16, works 4 to 12 every night, and somehow he finds a way to get a 4.0. And that's not but we just have so many amazing kids out there. They make me, they inspire me. I don't think I inspire them. They inspire me. And this last thing, I'm in the current working with guys now in Chicago who have lived with trauma all their life, who have inflicted a huge amount of damage and destruction and tragedy and done, unfortunately, too much, more than their fair share of shooting in Chicago. To see them transforming their lives and walking away from that and leading this peace movement, they'd be the last people theoretically you'd expect to be able to make change. And I'm like, if they can do that, then truly it's hard. It's breaks your heart sometimes. Transformation's not linear. We have good days and bad days. But to see grown men's capacity to go from killers to protectors and leaders and positive leaders in the community is the most inspiring thing I've ever seen. Yeah. So I'm full of hope.
My school in City College of New York, the Powell School, and the whole college, it's roughly a minority, 90%, and roughly 85% identify themselves as having been born somewhere else. See, these are immigrants. These are our future. Most of them take 5, 6, 7 years to get out of school, but they get out of school. They work part-time, they have trouble, but nevertheless we're there to help them. And it gives me the greatest pride to go up there and see these kids and to refresh myself with the knowledge that these youngsters are immigrants. So was I, sort of, by one generation when I got here. And it drives me crazy, truly it drives me crazy, that this country does not appreciate what immigrants have done for us and will continue to do for us. We got to do a better job of that, I'll tell you that.
Okay, gentlemen, this was amazing. Thank you so much. We were all so blessed to be able to be part of your conversation tonight, so we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.